It was February 1941, when German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel first stepped onto the burning sands of North Africa. World War II had spread its dark shadow across the world, and the British forces were pushing hard against Italian troops in Libya. Italy, led by Benito Mussolini, had dreamed of a grand empire in the Mediterranean, but their army struggled with outdated guns, slow trucks that broke down in the heat, and plans that fell apart under fire. Rommel, already known for his sharp mind from fights in France, came to turn things around. He took command of a small group of German tanks and soldiers, soon called the Afrika Korps, to back up the Italians and stop the British advance. From the start, Rommel saw problems with his new partners. The Italian soldiers were tough in close fights, holding lines with grit even when outnumbered, but their leaders often hesitated. Orders came too late, supplies got lost in the endless dunes, and radios crackled with static instead of clear messages. Rommel wanted quick strikes like wolves pouncing on sheep, but the Italians preferred to dig in and wait, like farmers guarding their fields. He pushed them hard during training, marching them through dust storms and teaching them to move faster with the German panzer divisions. Yet, deep down, he worried their weak spots could drag everyone down. In quiet moments by campfires, he shared thoughts with his officers. These allies fought with heart, but without better tools and bolder choices, they might crack like dry earth under tank tracks. As months passed, Rommel's small force grew bolder. By April, they smashed through British lines at the Egyptian border, capturing thousands of prisoners and shaking the Allied plans. The Desert Fox, as the British press named him in fear and respect, became a legend. His tricks, fake attacks to fool the enemy, night marches to surprise them, kept the Allies guessing. The Italians joined in some wins, like the push to Tobruk in January 1942, where their infantry held hills while German guns blasted from afar. But losses mounted too. Fuel ran low, planes from Malta bombed supply ships, and the desert itself fought back with sand that clogged engines and thirst that weakened men. Rommel learned to live on dates and canned meat, sleeping in his command car as stars wheeled overhead. By late 1942, the war's tide began to shift. American and British troops landed in Morocco and Algeria during Operation Torch, a surprise move that caught the Axis off guard. Now, Rommel faced not just his old British foes, but fresh American divisions pouring in from across the Atlantic. The United States had entered the war only a year before, after Pearl Harbor, and their soldiers were eager but green. The II Corps, under Major General Lloyd Fredendall, included units like the 1st Infantry Division, men straight from training camps in the States. They brought shiny new Sherman tanks, jeeps that zipped over rough ground, and plenty of food, canned Spam and chocolate bars that made Italian rations look plain. But battles were not won with gear alone. These troops had drilled on flat fields back home, not faced real bullets or the chaos of war. Rommel, pulling back from Egypt after the big loss at El Alamein, eyed this new enemy with a mix of curiosity and scorn. Reports from scouts painted a picture. American camps spread too wide, like picnickers on a beach, with little cover from airstrikes. Their officers shouted orders from safe headquarters miles away, not leading from the front like Rommel did. And worst of all, in Rommel's mind, they seemed soft, much like the Italians he had grumbled about for months. Brave in parades, perhaps, but untested in the grind of desert fights, poor at night watches, quick to panic under shell fire, and reliant on trucks that kicked up dust for enemy spotters. He compared them to his allies. Both had heart, but lacked the iron edge of battle-hardened Germans. In staff meetings near Tripoli, Rommel sketched maps and pointed to weak points, betting the Americans would fold fast, just as some Italian lines had in past pushes. Health woes plagued Rommel too, a secret toll of the campaign. The sun baked his skin, dust filled his lungs, and old wounds from France ached in the dry air. Doctors urged rest, but he pressed on, driven by dreams of linking Axis forces across Tunisia and maybe even grabbing Allied oil fields. By January 1943, his army huddled in defensive lines, short on everything from bullets to boots. The British Eighth Army hammered from the south under General Bernard Montgomery, while the new American II Corps blocked the west. Rommel saw a chance in the middle, a narrow mountain pass called Kasserine, guarded lightly by US and French troops. Rain had turned the roads to mud, slowing everyone, but his panzers could still rumble through. He planned a sharp jab there to shatter the soft center and buy time. Little did the Desert Fox know, this move would test his harsh words. The Americans, mocked as feeble like his Italian friends, carried a spark of something fiercer. Training back home had taught them basics, and now, under fire, they would learn the rest the hard way. The clash at Kasserine loomed, a spark in the powder keg of North Africa, where scorn would meet steel, and the sands would run red with the cost of underestimating a rising giant. February 1943 dawned cold and misty over the rugged hills of central Tunisia. Rain had fallen hard the night before, turning wadis, those dry riverbeds, into rushing streams that bogged down trucks and men alike. Erwin Rommel, bundled in his dusty greatcoat, peered through binoculars from a hilltop near the town of Faid. His face, lined from years of war, twisted in a grim smile as reports trickled in. The American positions ahead looked thin, like a loose net ready to tear. The Kasserine Pass, a jagged gap just wide enough for two roads snaking through sheer cliffs, stood as the gateway to Allied supply lines. Rommel had chosen it well, a natural choke point where his panzers could smash through and roll up the flank, much like he had done against the French in 1940. The Desert Fox's plan was simple but savage: feint with Italian units to the south, then unleash the 10th and 21st Panzer Divisions in a lightning thrust. His scouts, creeping forward on foot, counted American foxholes shallow as graves, barely deep enough to shield against shrapnel. The US II Corps, stretched across 50 miles of front, mixed green GIs from the 34th Infantry Division with battle-worn French troops who had fought since the fall of their homeland. Major General Lloyd Fredendall commanded from an underground bunker deep in Algeria, over 60 miles back, barking orders by radio that often arrived garbled or too late. Rommel, ever the frontline leader, rode in his modified half-track, close enough to hear the first shots echo off the rocks. In his mind, these Yankees were no different from the Italians he had chided for months, full of bluster, short on grit. "Soft as butter," he muttered to his aide, Hans-Joachim Schreipler, as they watched artillery shells burst harmlessly short. Their tanks, those big Shermans with 75mm guns, sat parked in neat rows, engines cold, crews brewing coffee instead of checking oil. Rommel bet they would scatter like startled birds at the first roar of his 88mm cannons. The attack kicked off at dawn. Italian troops under General Giovanni Messe probed the southern flank, drawing American fire while German engineers blasted a path through minefields with Bangalore torpedoes, long bamboo tubes packed with explosives. By noon, the 10th Panzer Division, with Mark IV tanks rumbling like thunder, crashed into the pass itself. American half-tracks, light and speedy but thin-skinned, fired back with 50-caliber machine guns, chewing up the lead vehicles. But numbers told. Rommel's men poured through, outflanking the defenders. Panic rippled along the lines. A young lieutenant from Iowa, hunkered in a ditch with his platoon, later recalled the terror, the whine of Stuka dive bombers, those screaming eagles of the Luftwaffe, dropping 500-pound bombs that shook the earth like earthquakes. French colonial troops, equipped with old Hotchkiss machine guns, held longer, their bayonets flashing in the sun, but even they buckled as panzers overran their positions. By evening the breach was wide. Rommel pushed forward, his columns advancing 10 miles an hour, capturing Sened Station and its water pumps, vital in the thirst-parched land. American losses mounted fast, trucks flipped in muddy ruts, jeeps abandoned with flat tires, and men stumbling back under darkening skies. Fredendall's orders, relayed through a chain of colonels, called for counterattacks that never gelled. The 1st Armored Division's tanks, meant to plug the gap, idled due to radio failures and foggy maps. Rommel's scorn deepened with each report. Over a hasty meal of hard bread and tinned sausage, he sketched the next day's moves, laughing bitterly at tales of GIs fleeing with hands up, their web gear clattering. "Like the Italians at Gazala," he said, referencing a 1942 rout where Axis allies had melted away. These Americans, with their fresh uniforms and factory-new rifles like the Garand semi-automatic, seemed equally feeble, brave in bursts but crumbling without stiff spines from above. His panzers pressed on, gobbling fuel at 2 miles per gallon, but the prize beckoned, the Allied port at Tebessa, stuffed with gasoline drums and ammunition crates. The second day brought chaos under grey clouds. February 20th saw the 21st Panzer Division swing north, flanking through the Jebel Semama hills where French Zouaves in baggy trousers fought house to house in mud-brick villages. American artillery, 75mm pack howitzers hauled by mules, barked defiance, shelling roads and forcing halts. But Rommel adapted, as always, diverting infantry to clear ridges while tanks idled, engines straining against the slope. By afternoon, they hit the heart of II Corps at Sidi Bou Zid, a dusty crossroads. Here, the 1st Armoured Division finally rolled out, 52 medium tanks in a hasty charge, their 30mm armour plates glinting. For a moment, it looked like a standoff. Shermans trading shots with panzers at 800 yards, high explosive rounds blooming like deadly flowers. But German 88s, towed anti-tank guns with wicked accuracy, picked them off one by one, their hypervelocity shells punching through like hot knives. 46 American tanks burned that day, crews bailing out into olive groves, hands scorched. Rommel, observing from a forward post, nodded approval. His losses were light, 20 tanks knocked out, a few hundred wounded. But the haul was rich, 200 American vehicles captured, plus field guns tipped over in retreat. Word spread through his ranks. The enemy was breaking just as predicted. Italian motorized units trailing behind scooped up stragglers, their Fiat trucks groaning under looted crates of cigarettes and boots. Yet, cracks showed in the Axis drive. Supplies lagged. Italian quartermasters, true to form, miscounted rations, leaving panzer crews to siphon fuel from wrecked foes. Rain hammered down again, turning the advance into a slog. Rommel, coughing from sinus pain, ignored his doctor's pleas and drove personally to the front, urging his men onward. He dreamed of a grand encirclement, trapping 10,000 Allies in the pass like fish in a net. As night fell on February 20th, the tide hinted at turning. American reinforcements, elements of the 9th Infantry Division, dug in deeper, their engineers stringing barbed wire under flashlight beams. Air support arrived too, P-47 Thunderbolts from the 12th Air Force, squat bruisers with 850 caliber guns, strafing columns at treetop height. Rommel pulled back slightly, conserving strength, but his mockery lingered in dispatches to Berlin. "The Americans fight like schoolboys," he wired, equating their scatter to Italian collapses he had long decried. Little did he sense the fire kindling in those soft ranks, the raw anger of rookies who had tasted defeat and vowed revenge. Kasserine was no end but a forge, hammering inexperience into something sharper. The pass, scarred by craters and blood, waited for the counterblow that would shatter illusions. February 24, 1943 marked the end of the bloodiest days at Kasserine Pass, but for the battered men of the US II Corps, the real fight was just beginning. Smoke still curled from wrecked tanks along the muddy roads as the last German columns pulled back, their treads churning ruts deep as wagon wheels. Erwin Rommel, nursing a headache from the thin mountain air, rode in silence toward his headquarters near the coastal town of Mareth. His push had gained ground, over 50 miles in 5 days, but at a cost. Stretched supply lines snaked like veins through hostile hills, and Allied bombers, those heavy B-25 Mitchells with 1350 caliber guns apiece, prowled the skies by day. He had tasted victory's edge, smashing what he saw as soft foes, yet something nagged at him. Reports from captured American officers spoke not of broken spirits, but of quiet fury, men vowing to dig deeper next time. Rommel dismissed it as bluster, akin to the Italians' empty boasts after Gazala, but deep down, the Desert Fox sensed a shift in the wind. Back in Allied camps, the mood was grim as a winter dawn. Casualties tallied high, 300 dead, 3,000 wounded, and another 3,000 missing or taken prisoner, their helmets and packs littering the pass like forgotten toys. The 1st Armoured Division alone lost 183 tanks, more iron than the Africa Corps had fielded at the start. Major General Lloyd Fredendall's remote command drew sharp whispers. His bunker, carved into a hill with silk sheets for comfort, felt worlds away from the front. Lieutenant General Dwight D. Eisenhower, overall Allied boss, flew in by C-47 Dakota transport, his face stern under the brim of his overseas cap. He walked the scarred ground, kicking at shell casings, and listened to junior officers spill the truth. Poor maps that marked dry wadis as safe routes, radios tuned to wrong frequencies, and foxholes so shallow a grazing bullet could find flesh. French allies, their blue coats muddied, shared tales of abandonment, left to hold ridges alone while American units withdrew in haste. The wake-up hit like a thunderclap. Eisenhower acted fast, sacking Fredendall and tapping Major General George S. Patton, Jr. to take the two-corps helm. Patton, a firebrand with a pearl-handled Colt revolver on his hip, arrived by jeep on February 25th, his eyes blazing under bushy brows. No stranger to tanks, he had led the 1st U.S. Armored Brigade in World War I. He tore into the ranks like a drill sergeant on payday. Laziness is the mother of all evil, he barked at a briefing in a tent lit by kerosene lamps, his voice gravelly from cigars. He ordered deeper foxholes, 6 feet long and 4 feet down, proof against blast waves. Patrols doubled at night, with standing orders to probe enemy lines, not huddle in fear. Engineers rushed concertina wire and mines to the front, while quartermasters issued better goggles against dust and maps, marked with fresh intelligence from ultra-code breakers in England. Patton's changes spread like wildfire through the Corps. The 9th Infantry Division, fresh from stateside maneuvers, learned to pair infantry squads with tank platoons, GIs riding Sherman fenders, ready to leap off and clear villages with bayonets fixed. Artillery spotters, once lone wolves, now worked hand-in-glove with P-47 pilots, calling strikes via backpack radios that crackled clear. Training shifted too. Mock battles in olive groves taught combined arms, where a single rifleman could spot for a 155mm howitzer battery miles back. Word came from higher up. General Omar Bradley, now deputy to Patton, pushed for lessons wired home to Fort Benning, where new divisions drilled the desert way. No more parades on polished fields. Now recruits crawled under live fire, tasted sand in their spam, and marched 20 miles before breakfast. Rommel, licking his wounds at Mareth, heard echoes of this stir. His own forces, a patchwork of German veterans and Italian conscripts, grumbled over short rations. Half a canteen of water per man, bully beef gone mouldy. The 10th Panzer Division nursed just 30 operational tanks, their crews patching tracks with baling wire. Italian General Giovanni Messe urged caution, fortifying the line with concrete pillboxes and anti-tank ditches, but Rommel chafed at the delay. He wired Berlin for reinforcements, only to get vague promises from Adolf Hitler, who dreamed of grand sweeps while ignoring the desert's bite. Scouts brought tales of American trucks rumbling east, loaded with crates stamped U.S. Army ordnance, and camps buzzing like beehives. One captured sergeant from Texas oil fields sketched Patton's new drills on a napkin, aggressive, unforgiving. Rommel crumpled it, muttering that these upstarts mimicked Italian bluster, loud but lacking staying power. Yet in quiet hours, staring at stars over the Mediterranean, he recalled his own green days in World War I, how defeat at Longarone had forged him. Could these Yankees do the same? By early March, the II Corps tested its mettle at Medellin, a dusty plain south of the Mareth line. Patton's men, now with blood in their eyes, repelled a probing attack by the 15th Panzer Division. American bazooka teams, those shoulder-fired rocket launchers with 2.36-inch warheads, ambushed lead tanks at 50 yards, flames leaping 20 feet high. Artillery barrages, timed to the second, blanketed the fields, forcing German withdrawals with tails between legs. Losses were light, just a dozen vehicles, but the wind rang like a bell. GIs, faces blackened with camouflage grease, slapped backs and shared cigarettes, their laughter cutting the night. Patton wired Eisenhower, "We have the bastards on the run." French troops, reinvigorated with new American mortars, joined the cheer, their old grudges fading in shared sweat. This spark at Medellin lit the path forward. Rommel, sensing the noose tighten, slipped away to a hospital in Austria on March 9th, his body broken by the campaign's grind, fever, dizziness, a liver strained from pills. He left Messe in charge, but the momentum had flipped. The US II Corps, once mocked as feeble shadows of better men, stood taller, their drills echoing through the valleys. From the ashes of Kasserine rose a force honed sharp, ready to turn the Desert Fox's scorn into sand-swept regret. The drive east gathered steam, hills echoing with the growl of engines and the tramp of boots, as Tunisia's fate hung in the balance. March 23, 1943, broke with a fierce wind whipping across the stark hills near El Guetta, a forgotten village tucked in Tunisia's bone-dry spine. The US II Corps, reborn under George S. Patton's iron fist, had shaken off Kasserine's dust like a dog after a bath. No longer the scattered greenhorns Erwin Rommel had sneered at. These soldiers, faces hardened by loss, hands calloused from shovels, dug in with purpose. Patton prowled the lines in his command jeep, dust-caked boots stomping tent pegs, yelling for tighter security and quicker reloads. "We ain't here for picnics," he growled to a cluster of lieutenants around a hooded lantern. The 9th Infantry Division held the center, their M1 Garand rifles cleaned and oiled, while the 1st Infantry Division flanked left, Shermans idling like watchful beasts. To the east, the ghost of Rommel lingered. Though he had fled to a sickbed in Europe, his shadow loomed in the orders from General Giovanni Messe, who now led the Axis patchwork of Germans and Italians dug into the Mareth line, a wall of trenches and wire snaking south to the sea. Patton smelled blood. Intelligence from British code crackers painted the enemy weary, their panzers low on diesel after Kasserine's haul. He planned a double hook, the 9th pushing straight at El Guetta to draw fire, while the 1st swung north to Gabes, aiming to pinch the flank like crab claws. Dawn patrols, small teams of scouts in olive drab, crept forward through cactus thickets, marking minefields with white tape that fluttered like surrender flags. Air support hummed overhead, P-47 Thunderbolts, those juggernauts with radial engines growling at 2,000 revolutions per minute, circled like vultures, their pilots scanning for dust plumes. On the ground, GIs from Missouri and Pennsylvania shared last smoke's jokes about home-cooked apple pie, masking the knot in their guts. They knew the Italians waited, the young fascist division, teenagers in black shirts, backed by the veteran Trieste division, their Beretta submachine guns chattering in drills. Rommel's old scorn echoed in Axis briefings. Messe read aloud captured dispatches calling Americans soft as overripe fruit, much like the feeble Italians of old. But these foes had changed. Whispers from POW interrogations spoke of night marches and ambush drills that left no room for weakness. The assault erupted at first light. American artillery, 105mm howitzers belching fire from hidden gullies, laid a creeping barrage, shells marching forward at 50 yards per minute, churning earth to powder. The 9th Infantry charged uphill 392, a rocky knob crowned with olive trees twisted like old men. Italian machine guns, water-cooled Fiats spitting lead at 600 rounds per minute, raked the slopes, pinning squads behind boulders. Private Eddie Slovic, a reluctant draftee from Detroit, clutched his rifle and crawled inch by inch, heart pounding like a bass drum. By noon, the hill fell after brutal hand-to-hand, bayonets clashing, grenades bursting in foxholes, the air thick with cordite and cries in broken English and Italian. Losses stung, 200 wounded in hours, but the view paid off. Spotters called in thunderbolts that dove at 300 miles per hour, 500-pound bombs cratering enemy batteries below. To the north, the 1st Infantry's push met stiffer resistance. Colonel Alexander Stark's Combat Command C, 30 Shermans strong with 37mm guns poking like stingers, rolled toward El Guetta under a sun that baked metal hot as skillets. Italian anti-tank guns, 75mm Paquet 40s borrowed from Germans, barked from camouflaged pits, their armor-piercing rounds slamming home at 1,000 yards. One Sherman brewed up in seconds, its turret hatch blown skyward, the crew tumbling out in flames doused by canteens. But Patton's lessons held. Infantry screens advanced first, bazooka men popping from ditches to fire 2.36-inch rockets that punched through tracks at 20 yards. By dusk, The Americans clawed 2 miles, capturing a dozen Fiat Ansaldo tanks, lightweights with 20mm cannons, now prizes for scrap. Italian prisoners, dusty and defeated, trudged back with hands laced behind necks, muttering about diaboli Americani who fought like demons, not the soft boys Rommel had mocked. Mesa countered hard on March 28th, throwing the 10th Panzer Division into the fray. 50 Mark IV tanks with long 75mm barrels, veterans of France and Russia. They slammed into the 1st Infantry near Hill 504, a bald dome pocked with shell holes. Dust clouds billowed as treads chewed gravel, machine guns stitching the air at 500 rounds per minute. American gunners, hunkered in their Sherman's bellies, traversed turrets with hand cranks when electrics failed, firing high-explosive rounds that shattered optics and brewed tea from radiators. A fierce duel raged for hours, panzers circling like sharks, Shermans hull down behind ridges, their armor shrugging off glancing hits. One GI tanker from the tank named Battle in Basic nailed 3 foes with point-blank shots, flames leaping 30 feet as ammunition cooked off. But the desert betrayed the attackers, sand-clogged filters, engines overheated at idle. And American artillery zeroed in, 155mm Long Toms lobbing shells from 10 miles back, airbursts shredding tracks. By April 1st, El Ghouta was a graveyard of steel. The Axis withdrew, leaving 45 tanks smoking hulks, their crews marching south under white flags. US losses topped 500, but morale soared, medals pinned under acorn oaks, letters home boasting of giving Jerry hell. Patton, cigar clenched, toured the field in his half-track, slapping shoulders and cursing stragglers. "That's how you lick 'em," he declared, eyes on the horizon. To the south, British General Bernard Montgomery's 8th Army cracked the Marath line on March 27th, their 40 Matilda tanks grinding through wire like bulldozers. The noose tightened. Axis supplies, funneled through Tunis's narrow ports, dwindled to whispers. Messe, in a concrete bunker lit by flickering bulbs, pored over maps stained with coffee rings, Berlin's radio crackling empty promises. Rommel, convalescing in Semmering's cool pines, read the cables with sinking heart, his desert empire built on bold dashes crumbling under the weight of those damned Yankees he had once dismissed. The TUI Corps pivoted north in April, linking with the British at Wadi Akarit on the 4th, their cheers mingling over captured wine. Patton's men, now a machine oiled by blood, marched 30 miles in 3 days, boots blistering but spirits unbroken. French troops under General Alphonse Juin, repaid in kind, stormed Fondouk Pass with Chasseurs d'Afrique on horseback, sabres flashing beside American jeeps. Air supremacy sealed it. 500 sorties a day from Spitfire fighters and B-26 Marauders, twin-engine bombers dropping 5,000-pounders on airfields, turning runways to rubble. Axis Focke-Wulf 190 fighters, sleek interceptors with 20mm cannons, rose in futile defense but fell like autumn leaves. 20 downed in a week. As April waned, Tunisia trembled. The TUI Corps, forged in Kasserine's fire, stood as the anvil to Montgomery's hammer. Rommel's dreams of a Mediterranean fortress, endless sands under swastika flags, faded like mirages. His mockery, once a sharp blade, now cut both ways. The soft troops he likened to feeble Italians had become wolves in the waste, their howls echoing toward the final reckoning. The road to Tunis beckoned, paved with the wreckage of overreach, where victory's shadow grew long and unforgiving. May 1st, 1943 saw the Tunisian sun climb high over the coastal plains north of the ancient city of Bizerte, casting long shadows from olive groves scarred by war. The US TUI Corps, tempered like steel in the forge of desert battles, rolled forward in a tide of olive-drab might. Major General George S. Patton, Jr., his face etched with the lines of sleepless nights, stood atop a rise near Matur, binoculars pressed to his eyes, watching columns snake through wadis choked with abandoned Axis gear. No longer the mocked soft troops Erwin Rommel had likened to his faltering Italian allies, these Americans, veterans of El Ghouta and Kasserine, marched with the steady rhythm of men who had tasted defeat and spat it out. Patton's voice, hoarse from shouting over engine roars, urged them on. "Forward, boys, the end's in sight." The 9th Infantry Division led the charge, their jeeps bouncing over ruts, while the 1st Infantry flanked right, Sherman's grinding gravel under 70-ton treads. To the south, British Lieutenant General Harold Alexander's 18th Army Group hammered from the east, their 150 Churchills, those squat tanks with thick 75mm armour, pushing like ploughs through the last defences. The final offensive, Operation Vulcan, kicked off on April 30th, a thunderous symphony of steel and fire. Allied artillery, from American 155mm guns to British 25-pounders, unleashed a dawn barrage that shook the earth for 2 hours straight. Shells whistling at 2,000 feet per second, cratering bunkers and shredding barbed wire like confetti. Overhead, P-51 Mustangs from the 9th Air Force, sleek hunters with 650 caliber machine guns, swept low at 350 miles per hour. Strafing Luftwaffe remnants, Focke-Wulf 190A8s, their radial engines smoking as they spiraled into the sea. On the ground, GIs from the 34th Infantry Division stormed Hill 578, a key height overlooking the Seggiane Valley. Italian defenders, the Nembo paratroopers in camouflage smocks, fought with desperate fury, their Breda light machine guns chattering from caves honeycombed into the rock. Hand grenades arced like deadly rain, and close-quarters brawls left bayonets bloodied, but the Americans pressed with flamethrowers, portable infernos spitting 20-foot jets of napalm that turned hideouts to hellish glows. By noon, the hill was theirs, 300 prisoners herded down the slope, their black fezes bobbing like corks. Patton sensed the Axis cracking. Intelligence scouts slipping through moonlit patrols on foot reported chaos in enemy lines. German officers berating Italian units for slow retreats, supply dumps ablaze from B-26 Marauder raids. Mess's command post, a villa on the outskirts of Tunis, buzzed with frantic teletypes, Berlin demanding a stand, but fuel tanks stood at 10%, and rations stretched to 1 meal a day of hardtack and olives. Rommel, back in Germany, nursing his health, paced hospital corridors, poring over maps sent by courier. His desert dreams of a vast African front, oil wells gushing for the Reich, lay in tatters. Cables from Messe painted a grim picture. The soft Americans, once dismissed as feeble echoes of Italy's woes, now struck like hammers, their tactics crisp, their morale a wall of iron. Rommel's old scorn twisted into reluctant respect. In private notes, he admitted these Yankees learned quicker than any foe he had faced, their factories churning tanks faster than scrapyards could claim them. By May 2nd, the Tenth Corps breached the final ridges. The 36th Engineer Regiment, with bulldozers roaring at full throttle, cleared paths through minefields, 10,000 pounds of explosives per hour, each blast a geyser of sand and screams. Shermans rolled into Matur town square littered with wrecked Opel trucks and Fiat motorcycles, their engines still ticking cool. Local Arabs, in flowing burnouses, watched from doorways, offering figs and water to the liberators, who shared chocolate bars in return. Resistance crumbled. A German Fallschirmjäger company, elite paratroopers in field grey, held a crossroads for hours, their MG-42 buzzsaws firing at 1,200 rounds per minute. But American mortars, 81mm tubes lobbing shells at 3,000 yards, silenced them, nest by nest. Prisoners poured in, 5,000 in a day, hands raised, eyes hollow from the grind. One Italian colonel, captured with his staff car intact, shook his head at interrogators. "Your boys fight like lions now, not lambs." The push to Bizerte accelerated on May 6th, a race against the British from the south. Patton, ever the competitor, wired Alexander, "We'll take the port first or die trying." His corps surged 20 miles in 48 hours, infantry double-timing beside half-tracks, dust clouds marking their trail like war paint. The port city fell on May 7th after a sharp skirmish, naval guns from offshore destroyers, 8-inch barrels thundering at 15 miles range, softened the docks, while P-4060 Liberators, 4-engine heavies with 12 50-caliber turrets, pounded warehouses to splinters. GIs waded through rubble, M1 carbines at the ready, flushing snipers from rooftops. The stars and stripes fluttered over the lighthouse by dusk. A prize denied to Montgomery's men by mere hours. Casualties were light, 50 dead against 200 Axis, but the haul was immense. Quays stacked with 5,000 tons of captured fuel, cranes frozen mid-lift, and U-boat pens cracked open like eggshells. Tunis, the ancient heart of Tunisia, surrendered 2 days later on May 9th, its whitewashed Medina echoing with Allied horns. Operation Strike, the northern pincer, closed the trap. French troops under General Jean de Lattre de Tassigny stormed Massicot, their Char B-1 bis tanks, hulking beasts with 75mm howitzers, crushing roadblocks. From the east, Montgomery's New Zealanders and Indians broke through at Amphidaville, their Bren gun carriers zipping over flats. The Axis pocket, 100 miles wide, shrank to a noose. Messe radioed surrender terms on May 12th, his voice steady over crackling lines, unconditional, for all under his flag. Dawn on May 13th brought the end. 250,000 troops streamed from foxholes, weapons stacked in pyramids, German eagles and Italian fasces trampled underfoot. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, Rommel's successor in the west, watched from afar as panzers, once proud tigers with 88mm mains, towed away as trophies. Rommel, in a Berlin briefing room thick with cigarette smoke, absorbed the news like a gut punch. His health rally faltered. Doctors noted tremors in his hands, the desert's ghosts haunting his sleep. The field marshal who had mocked U.S. troops as soft, like his feeble Italian brethren, now faced the wreckage. 300,000 casualties, 1,000 guns, 500 tanks, and 2,000 aircraft lost or seized. Tunisia, his grand canvas, slipped away in weeks, a campaign that started with bold sweeps now closed by Yankee grit. Allied leaders toasted in Algiers, Eisenhower with the Scotch, Patton with bourbon, while GIs scrawled letters home, "We showed 'em." The TUI Corps, from rookies routed at Kasserine to victors in the Vines, marched to ships bound for Sicily, their packs lighter, their steps sure. The Desert Fox's dreams, built on sand and scorn, crumbled to dust, a lesson etched in the ledgers of war. Underestimate the underdog at your peril. North Africa's sands, stained red, then washed clean by rains, whispered of turnarounds, where the mocked became the makers of history.